there was a large proportion of Lutherans somewhere in Scandinavia that started blowing up non-Lutherans. Or no, sorry, let's be absolutely right, started massacring peasants. Do you think that people would say, hang on a minute, let's not criticize Martin Luther. He did that by the standards of his time. We shouldn't criticize his followers all that much. We shouldn't point out what he said and so on. No, we just say, you know, don't go and massacre peasants. Full stop. It was rubbish at the time, it's rubbish now. It's the same with the Quran.
You're missing the point. If you're failing to judge...
Hello, welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we're going to be checking out a video where Douglas Murray debates some Islam scholar on the topic, Islam is a religion of peace. Wow, I believe this is going to be very educative. So let's start with the video. Go.
You are about to witness an intense debate that took place a few years ago between Douglas Murray and a Muslim scholar on whether Islam is a religion of peace. This debate remains ever relevant even today and gets even more heated towards the end of this video. Douglas Murray did not hold back.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have to look at facts. We should also just quickly, if I may, refer something to the wording of tonight's debate. Ayan's already mentioned this, but I mean, let me put it this way. You're I'm sure, liberal-minded New York audience, or at least I hope you are. We'll see. But I imagine that if the motion we had here tonight was Christianity is a religion of peace, we get to the Q&A, perhaps even before, and somebody would say, if the other side were arguing for that, somebody would say, what about the Crusades? What about that? And then there'd be some other clever clogs who'd say, what about that Florida pastor the other week? That was a nasty business. That's Christianity for you. If we'd had tonight, Judaism is a religion of peace, the other side were trying to argue that. Sure as anything, there'd be people popping up in the hall tonight saying, oh, there's this bit in one of the Old Testament books, really, really bad. All sorts of massacres going on. Why don't you talk about that? There might even be people trying to say that, the argument that Judaism was a religion of peace couldn't be argued because people would say, look at what Israel is doing. And isn't that a direct response? And so on. So let's not have a debate about Islam and whether or not Islam is a religion of peace without talking about the facts to do with Islam. It's an absurd situation we're in, where nothing that anyone does whilst being Muslim is any responsibility of Islam's. Yet anything anyone does whilst being a Christian or a Jew is responsibility of all Christians, all Jews. Let's make this as straightforward as I can. Take the categorization that eminent scholars like Bernard Lewis, Ibn Waraq have made. Let's say Islam is a very, very complex thing. And the best way I can do this in the very short time I have is say you have three Islams. Islam 1, 2, and 3. Islam 1, the Quran and the life of Muhammad and the Hadith. Islam 2, the tradition of the Sharia. Islam 3, what Muslims do now. The first of those things, Islam, the Quran, and so on, is bad. It is bad. There is a lot of violence in it. And what's worse, the peaceful verses are superseded by the violent verses. The violent verses also, sadly, are more numerous in number. Then you've got the life of Muhammad. Again, a bad man. A very bad man, it has to be said. Not a great role model, if you look at it. Takes child brides, abuses a small girl, multiple wives, himself a warrior, himself a war criminal, himself beheads Jews. This, I would have thought, would be a signal of not great peacefulness. Then you've got the tradition of the Sharia. Again, not great peacefulness. Still, no schools of Sharia that people in this hall would want to submit to. And thirdly, what Muslims do now. Thankfully, there is some hope in that one. Because most Muslims, thank goodness, I almost said thank God, but old habits die hard. Most Muslims don't do what those texts say because they exercise their judgment as moral beings without having to refer to defunct holy books. It is not a small thing. It's not, as it were, a detail. It's not like a wacky Florida pastor that you've got the largest Sunni state of Saudi Arabia, the most important Sunni state in the world, the most extraordinary closed prison of a society. It's not a detail, it's not a one-off nut job that the Shiite Republic of Iran is what it is, led by the people it's led by. That is not an accident, it's not a detail. The thing that worries me is that although tonight we hear from the fellow panelists here about how Islam is a religion of peace. The fact is that the people who are making the decisions in the religion, the people who are preaching the religion, the heads of that religion, people like Sheikh Qaradawi, who broadcasts anti-Semitic, the most appalling filth every week on the main networks, that is the faith that's speaking for you guys. I wish that, Ziba, you were on every week on Al Jazeera, but you're not. Qaradawi is. The problem is that Islam is an unstable component, as a religion, an unstable component. 1,000 years ago, the Mu'tazilites tried to reform the religion. They were wiped out. The fact is that Islam is many things, many, many things. But to say it's a religion of peace is nonsense. It's to ignore reality. It's to ignore very difficult but necessary facts, not paradigms, but facts. To say that Islam is a religion of peace is to say something based entirely on hope. It's to elevate a hope into truth. And I hope, as you all know, history teaches us that's a very bad thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Smart.
Douglas Murray's claim that we cannot evaluate whether Islam is a religion of peace without acknowledging violent acts committed by its adherents, including those cited by historical and religious leaders, challenges the narrative that all religions are equally scrutinized. This is a crucial point in understanding the broader discourse on religious violence. For instance, when discussing the violent passages in the Old Testament or the history of the Crusades, commentators and scholars often highlight these elements to argue about Christianity's historical belligerence. However, Murray argues that a similar analytical lens is not applied to Islam, where there is a significant history of conquests and battles led by its founder Muhammad, which are often glossed over or rationalized in Western discourse. Statistically, the global rise in Islamist terrorism has been well documented by institutions like the Global Terrorism Index, which often shows that groups espousing radical interpretations of Islam commit a substantial percentage of terrorist acts worldwide. This data is critical, as it underscores the real-world implications of ideologies that, while claimed by only a minority within Islam, have a disproportionate impact on global security. Murray's argument is not just about theological debates, but touches on a broader societal issue: the importance of maintaining a single standard of criticism across all beliefs to ensure a balanced and fair discourse. By applying a double standard where one religion is scrutinized less intensely than others, society risks not only intellectual dishonesty, but also failing to address the root causes of religiously motivated violence. This, in turn, hampers efforts to develop effective counterterrorism strategies and fosters a culture of resentment and suspicion among those who feel that their concerns about Islamist extremism are not taken seriously.
There's a tendency when discussing Islam to suspend the tools that we have learnt and studied, that you have studied as well, that we use to analyze every other piece of scripture and literature in the world. And that is that we recognize that texts do not speak for themselves. We recognize that when we interpret scriptures and texts and books and poetry, that they are contextualized, that we have methodologies to approach them. When we're reading Shakespeare, when we're reading anything, we recognize that there's a way to interpret text, and there are schools of thought and differences over how to approach texts. Now, if we contextualize Martin Luther and say the Reformation was a good thing, despite the fact that he said, kill and slay the peasants, wherever you find them, when they followed Thomas Müntzer, when he was calling for not just breaking away from the papal authority, but also for rebelling against the monarchies and the dictators that they found themselves in. Martin Luther sided with the tyrants against Müntzer and said, kill the peasants wherever you find them. Despite that, I'm prepared to say the Reformation was a good thing. And the reason I'm prepared to say that is that Martin Luther must not be judged by the standards of civilization that we, after an accumulation of thousands of years, have arrived at. He must be judged by the standards of civilization that were around during his time.
Douglas Murray is about to offer a powerful response in a moment, but let me first highlight something important in response to what was just said. Firstly, the comparison between religious texts and literary works, like those of Shakespeare, is flawed in a fundamental way. Shakespeare's plays, while influential in the fields of literature and culture, are not used as a basis for legal systems, government policies, or contemporary ethical behavior. They are understood and taught as products of their time, with a clear distinction between their historical context and modern applicability. In contrast, religious texts like the Quran are actively used by many as guidelines for personal conduct and community norms. They are not merely historical documents, but are seen as timeless directives by followers. Furthermore, when ancient texts prescribe specific behaviors or make moral claims, they often carry implications for present-day actions and policies. For example, If certain passages of the Quran are interpreted as endorsing violence under specific circumstances, these interpretations can and do influence the behavior of believers today, justifying actions that are incompatible with modern human rights standards. This direct impact on contemporary ethical and legal systems necessitates a more critical and context-aware analysis than might be applied to purely historical or literary texts.
If there were currently Lutheran, there are Lutherans around, you meet them occasionally in Scandinavia and so on, very nice, very nice it is, and peaceable guys they are by and large. If, however, there was a large proportion of Lutherans somewhere in Scandinavia that started blowing up non-Lutherans, or no, sorry, let's be absolutely right, started massacring peasants, do you think that people would say, hang on a minute, let's not criticize Martin Luther, he did that by the standards of his time, we shouldn't criticize his followers all that much, we shouldn't point out what he said and so on. No, we just say, you know, don't go and massacre peasants, full stop. It was rubbish at
Douglas,
the time, it's rubbish now, it's the same with the Quran.
You're missing the point. If you're failing to judge...
This was such a very insightful debate and is absolutely necessary in today's world. Please let me know what you think in the comments.
What an interesting debate. You can tell this was really very heated. Wow. Douglas Murray categorized Islam into three major groups: the life of Prophet Muhammad, the Sharia law, and the present Islam. And Douglas Murray tried to prove his point that you can't say Islam is a peaceful religion and ignore all the crimes that have been perpetrated in the name of Islam religion. And he tried to prove that by saying that there are a lot of violent verses in the Quran, which I believe a lot of people has their own interpretation of the Quran. The way Mr. A will interpret the Quran is different from the way Mr. B will interpret the Quran. And a lot of people out there try to, exploit the Quran by, taking verses from the Quran and using it to justify their actions, which I believe that is totally wrong. And they take the verses from the Quran, they use it to justify their action. At the end of the day, they recruit people and make them believe that what they are doing is backed up by the Quran, which I believe is totally wrong. And Douglas Murray also agreed that there are a lot of peaceful Muslims, there are a lot of peaceful people in Islam, that we also have to admit that there are a lot of violent people in Quran. There are a lot of violent people in the Muslim, which we should also agree that Islam is a violent religion, based on the point Douglas Murray have mentioned, that even the founder of Islam, according to Douglas Murray, is a violent person. He's a bad person. According to Douglas Murray, he tried to explain Prophet Muhammad as someone who is a warlord, someone who beheaded prisoners, and even got married to a lady that is not even up to marriage age. So with this fact, Douglas Murray have stated to prove his point that Muhammad, which the Muslim look up to as an example, is a violent person, is a bad person. And we can tell the Muslim scholar in this debate try to educate Douglas Murray that you can't judge a person based on the civilization we have now. That you can't judge a person based on the civilization we have now. That you have to, if you want to judge Prophet Muhammad, that you have to judge Prophet Muhammad based on the civilization they have during their time. I think on that point, I kind of agreed with him to an extent, because the the things Douglas Murray have mentioned about Prophet Muhammad, I was not born during Prophet Muhammad's time. So I don't really know the civilization that was in place during Prophet Muhammad's time. Just like Douglas Murray have mentioned that Prophet Muhammad beheaded prisoners. Prophet Muhammad even married someone that is underage and, fought a lot of war. And it described Prophet Muhammad as a warlord. So I don't know, probably maybe during the time of Prophet Muhammad, you can marry a lady that is below 18, a lady that is below 15. I don't know if during Prophet Muhammad time, if the civilization during Prophet Muhammad time permits a man to marry a lady that is below 15, below 18. I don't know if the civilization during Prophet Muhammad time permits that. And I don't also know if the civilization during Prophet Muhammad time permits Prophet Muhammad to behead prisoners. And I don't think beheading people, I don't think have anything to do with Islam being a peaceful religion. Christian follow the example of Jesus, just like Muslim follow the example of Prophet Muhammad. So from this facts Douglas Murray have mentioned about Prophet Muhammad, I think if the Muslim are to follow after the example of Prophet Muhammad, they have to also consider the point the Muslim scholar mentioned, that those things were done by Prophet Muhammad because of the civilization during Prophet Muhammad time. So I believe Muslims should also consider that before making any judgments. And Muslims should also try to behave not only by looking at the Quran, but also by looking at the civilization we have now. I believe Muslims should do so. If Prophet Muhammad is going to be judged by the civilization they have during Prophet Muhammad time, means even the Quran was written by the civilization they have during Prophet Muhammad time. So the Muslims, let me say specifically the radical Muslims reading the Quran, they are not going to say Prophet Muhammad did all those things based on the civilization during Prophet Muhammad time. A lot of Muslims might misinterpret it and use it to justify their action, which is totally wrong. I believe this is what Douglas Murray is trying to address in this video, that you can't say Islam is a peaceful religion and ignoring all these violent things that have happened in Islam, about talking about Prophet Muhammad and talking about the Quran, the violent verses in the Quran, that you can't say Islam is a peaceful religion and ignore all these things. That's what Douglas Murray is trying to address in this video. Listening to Douglas Murray, I think I've really learned a lot. I'd also like to hear your comments. Don't forget, click on the subscribe button, click on the like button. Do have a nice day.
Yeah.